Okay, so we're at the end of the semester. Everyone has all of my sections have either given their oral reports or they're getting ready to in the next couple of days. I wanted to give a short tutorial on LabVIEW that's related to the data that we're supposed to be displaying for the final report and for the oral report. So here's the deal. The reason I'm doing this is because, first of all, I said that it doesn't really matter to me how you display data. I just want you just displaying it professionally. So you could use Excel, and people who've tried that have found out that it has its own set of issues in terms of trying to do the assignment. But however, we did, we basically gave you all the code you needed, and except for this very final LabVIEW assignment, but we gave you a good start on it. And however, though, the final VI that Professor Calhoun provided, while it's very useful and a lot of people have used it to good effect, very few people have figured out how to use the timestamp. And that's because I think it's not working in that VI, or at least I've tried. I've spent quite a bit of time playing around with it. I've learned a lot, but I also didn't really find a way to successfully integrate the timestamp into a VI using that final version that he supplied. So rather than require or expect you guys to do that, even though, like I said, you don't have to even use LabVIEW, I thought I would just dial it back a little bit, show a simpler version of this that I think works well, and I'm going to be using a simpler version or an earlier version of Professor Calhoun's VI. So I'm going to show you this VI that I've made quickly, show you how it works. Then I'm going to go and run through just the very basic guts of how to build it, not the full thing, talk about it a little bit. So then I think at that point, and then I'm going to supply you with the earlier version of Professor Calhoun's VI that I'm using for this. Anyway, that's the goal of this. So let's get started. So here we have this a VI that I have created for this purpose. Have a professional layout. This should be familiar to you that I'm going to come in and bring some data into it. I just want to point out a few things before I run it. First, I have a display speed here. I'm going to show you a simpler way of doing this in this tutorial. But the way this works right now is that I can change the speed at which the data is running live in the VI. So I'm going to start with low, and I've got my data in here that I went and got that I brought into my CSV file path. If I start running it, you'll see that I'm getting some data here. It's moving slowly. Things to point out is I have ranges of light here. I have a max and min and an average of light. I have an indicator when we're going above 75 degrees Fahrenheit, below 60 degrees, above 70, and below 40. You can see right now we're above 75. So let's just speed it up. Now I'm going medium. So this is essentially an animation of the data. Notice too that I've chosen ranges for my light that make sense in terms of the data I'm using. So I looked at the data, decided what made sense in terms of what I was seeing in the light, and then I created ranges that served the data in terms of explaining the display I was seeing. So I would suggest you do that. Let me go ahead and speed this up again to high so we can get done with it. So now we've gone through all the data, or at least the first 1,000 data set points. I think it looks like to me it ended. But this is another thing I did is I have a number of data points that I'm running through in the loop, and I'll show you how I did that in a second. Also, I have this slider here that allows me to scroll back through the data. So this is a really good way of looking at data from a single system. I could have made 3 copies of this in this same screen and had 3 data sets. Obviously, it's just the same thing 3 times. So that'd be a good way of comparing 3 systems. The only thing that I've not implemented here is anything to do with date stamps. So I think if I were using this in my report, it'd be important for me to also use Excel so that I could plot it in Excel, the data, and find where these different patterns are happening in terms of the times of day. I've talked about that in class a little bit, but let me just say, so for example, obviously this, when we're down here near 0, that's lights off, so that was this range here. I felt like this range here where there's a lot of, it's basically there's this line across here, so there's a lot of times that we're at about 1.5 volts. That's probably when all the lights are on in the room, so I call that ambient. And then I created, I think this is sunlight over here. I have arguments for that because I looked and I saw that this is during an afternoon. So I created ranges that fit what I was seeing in the data so that it would be, as I run it, it would make sense to the viewer. All right, so let's go and just talk about how a basic way that I created this VI. So I'm going to start with a new VI. And I'm going to look at the block diagram and the front panel at the same time. First thing I'm going to do is bring in a sub VI, bring in Professor Calhoun's VI, and you can do this with any VI. And so you can do it with the one that you're already using from him, or you can do it with the one I'm going to share with you. My point being is that there's a way to bring in VIs. If I right-click in the block diagram, select a VI. I can go choose a VI as the basis for or the starting point for my work. The one I'm going to use here is called Cloud Data Processor V3. This is an earlier version of Professor Calhoun's VI. I bring it in. You see I get an icon. If I right-click on that icon, I can go to View as Icon, turn off View as Icon, and then I have access to the inputs. So if I pull down, I see now that I have a file path coming in and then 3 output arrays. So the first thing I'm going to do is just, and I would always suggest this, rather than trying to find an input and then attach it to something, I always click on the things that I want to, or as often as it makes sense, I click on the input or output that I'm trying to connect to, and then go to Create. So for example, here I'm going to create a control, and then we'll see that it automatically creates the CSV file path that we are familiar from other VIs and from Professor Calhoun's base VI. So I'm just going to I'm going to rename this MQTT CSV data or something like that. So now I have the place to bring my data into over here. Next thing I'm going to do is create a for loop. You could create a while loop or a for loop. Doesn't for my own purposes, I'm going to create a for loop. And I remember I mentioned earlier that I'm going to create a control now for that for loop, and this will be the number of data points. So remember, we have data coming out in an array, humidity, light, temperature. So each iteration of the array of the loop is going to be one data set. So one humidity, light, temperature set of data. And the next time the loop runs, it'll go to the next data point. So that's exactly what we want. I'm going to go ahead and just so I don't forget, I'm going to put in a number over here, 1,000 data points, whatever you want to do. So the next thing I'm going to do is show you a nice little component. The way that if you go back and see what I did here, this single chart having 3 different data sets in it, that is just a typical chart like we're used to, but it's being the inputs are a bundle. So I'm going to come right click, search for bundle, bring in a bundle component. Make it bigger here, and now I'm just going to bring in my 3 data array sets. I'm rearranging them because it makes sense to me to have temperature on top, humidity second, and light third. Remember, I can now come and clean these up. Didn't really clean it up that great as far as I'm concerned, but I think it's more confusing. Let me try that again. It's not the greatest, but anyway, the point is you can see where the wires are going in. So now I'm going to come over into my front panel, drop in I'm going to drop in a waveform chart. I'm going to right click on it and come down to stack plots. I'm going to select stack plots. Then if I bring it into my loop here and connect it to my bundle, you'll see over here now that I have three plots on top of each other in this same chart. So let's just go ahead and, oh, actually, okay, so we could bring data into this now and it would run. Let's do one other thing. You notice I had this display speed, high, medium, low. That's done with a ring loop, and you can research that if you like and make it a little bit slicker. But really, we can just use the same component that we've used before, which is a millisecond wait time with a control. Create a control. And now over here we have milliseconds of wait. Oops. I'll just leave that where it is. Doesn't matter. No, I won't. I'll pull it down. We just line these up. So now we can do what I was doing with the slow, medium, and fast, but you can just type the numbers in, and it will automatically update as the loop is running. I'm going to start with the medium speed. So now let's go ahead and just bring some data into this. I'm going to go up and bring in that same data I had before. If I hit run, I will in fact start getting data here. And just to show you, I can slow it down, or I'm sorry, speed it up, or slow it down. Let me run it again. Now it's going very slowly. It started the loop again. I'll speed it up. Okay, so one thing I don't know if you noticed is that this there's a few things here that we can talk about while this is going. We automatically there are different amplitudes set for, or different ranges for these three plots. I can actually, let me speed this up so it finishes. I can go in and change these individually. So if I select this one and go to Properties and go to Scales, I can change either the X axis or the Y axis for that scale. I'm not going to do that right now, but that's how you would do it. So you can create whatever ranges you want here to match your data. This is set right now. I think that they're automatically adjusting, which is fine. It will keep your data within the range of the graph, but I find it a little bit confusing because you don't see the movement for the whole, or how far the data is fluctuating throughout the entire data set, because the range keeps changing, so it's sort of hard to tell. Okay, but another thing that you notice is if I start this, it was the data did not clear, the charts did not clear. Now I could do that manually by selecting a chart and coming to Data Operations and clearing it. But I don't want to do that. I want that to be automatic. So let me show you the way of doing that. And it introduces a new thing a new component that we have not used, or a new workflow called Property Node. So if I select this chart and right-click on it and go to Create Property Node, there's obviously tons of property nodes, but if I scroll down to the bottom, at least in my version, I have history data. Select that. Bring it in, keep it outside the loop. Now what's going to happen is I have to, right now this is reading. Oh no, it is writing. I think I want to change. Oh no, it's writing now. So I've changed it to write. So it's being written to. I'm going to right click and create a constant here on its input. So you see I have 3 zeros, there's 3 inputs coming in. So what's going to happen now is every time I start the chart, it's going to zero the chart out before the data comes in. So let me just run this again quickly. And now if I run it again, it clears it out and starts it again. So that's a nice way of doing that. I think it's important that you start from 0 with your charts, especially, for example, if I had a max and min or an average here that I'd I'd calculated in the VI block diagram, it would not reset those, and those would be additive, so that they would be getting larger and larger. Okay, so I think that's all I wanted to show you as a basic beginning point. Over here now, then in our in our loop, we could do all the stuff from the photocell VI that we did earlier in the semester. You could have the coerce, the range or coerce components and create ranges, or do it however you did it there. We could do the max min, or the when you're going over or under a certain amount, that could be just a greater than, similar to the range or coerce. We could do max min average. That's a very simple thing to research. Anyway, the point being that you could move from here. One other thing I do want to show you is that, so right now we have our data in this chart, but we can't see all of it. If I want to see all of it, or be able to see all of it, if I right-click on the chart and come to visible items and hit X scroll bar, I can now scroll back and forth through the data. And even if, for example, if I knew how often, when the data started and stops, and I knew how often my data, the delay between my data points, I could even look at these numbers, because the 0 through 100 is the first 100 data points in the array, and figure out approximately what time of day, or what, if it was afternoon or morning or whatever, that the data was in this, in each plot, and then make some conclusions from that. I could come in and change the way this plot is being displayed by coming here and looking at display or plots. So I could create, so here I can create more, or let's do this. Let me show you. I can create more gradations or more ticks in the range, which would make it easier to do what I just said. All right, anyway, that's really all I wanted to show you. I will now post on Canvas this CSV processor, which was the, what was it called? By the way, remember, maybe I didn't say this, if you click on this, I clicked on that sub VI, now I'm in the VI. And so I can look at the block diagram, I can do whatever I want to in here to investigate what's coming out of it. You can see here's where our the three output arrays are. Here's the input over here that we're using to get our data in. Anyway, I see this called Cloud Data Processor v3. That's what I will post on Canvas. All right, I hope this was helpful, and I will see you this week.